I want to take a moment to elaborate on an experience that I'm having with the presence process by Michael Brown. And it's a good opportunity to look at some templates that are often associated with teaching of various kinds. So let's look at the first example.
To discover more about this tool, I began facilitating others in this breathing practice, closely observing the effects. Another key insight that came to me was that my intent to heal myself, to get rid of my discomfort, was misguided. Perhaps this was why I hadn't succeeded despite my best efforts. In due course, I dropped my use of the word heal because of its connotation that something was wrong and had to be fixed. Instead, I began using the word integrate, which to me meant that there was a part of my experience that was unconscious, a part of my experience that I resisted, controlled, and sedated, which was asking to be incorporated into the whole.
So this is, I think, a key part of any teaching, any great book or whatever that you come across, is the delineation by language. So largely the same things have been taught in various cultural settings, in various languages throughout history. But in order to differentiate oneself, one has to rename words, basically. So in this case, Michael has taken the word heal, which is to make whole, to restore the wholeness, and substituted it with the word to integrate, which is to make whole and restore the wholeness, to integrate something, to heal something. It is the same thing. But this is one of the ways that, a variety of books and belief systems separate us, is because, and he builds on this throughout the book, and to some extent is anti-healers by the end of the book, and why he won't help healers become a profession and blah, blah, blah. And then he explains it, as him having a bad experience in his own healing practice of, getting sick and what he made of that. But there are healers, of course, just as there are integrators, just as there are syntegrators, just as there are any number of words in the English language and any number of words in all the other languages that mean to assist people's well-being in a variety of ways. And each of them may go through their own distinctions, right? You may have someone where the default is to integrate, and then they go back to saying, no, it's to make whole. It's not to integrate, because nothing was ever disintegrated, right? All we're doing is healing the illusion of the mind, which has fragmented things. So we're not healing the disintegrated parts, or we're not integrating the disintegrated parts. We're healing the delusion of the disintegration, right? We have this mental map that's faulty, that we're disintegrated, and we're healing the mental map such that our awareness of ourselves is integrated. Whereas before, our awareness of ourselves was of not integrated. So you could listen to anyone describing going on that journey both ways and in thousands of other directions. And you can say, well, that's your point, that's your perspective, that's a distinction that was meaningful to you. But, Michael uses the word we, throughout this journey, and, let's listen a little bit later.
Healing felt like I was excluding something from my experience, Integration felt like I was embracing everything I experienced.
So, there's another aspect that is often, involved in this type of material, which is a certain grandiosity. It's all, it's everything is there, or it happens effortlessly. That's one of the other things that kind of grates on me a little bit as I listen to it. We live in a reality, because what he's doing is taking his own, personal meaning around personal distinctions, and he's extrapolating that. He's kind of taking it out there to now, we release all tension. We now see the world as such and such. Without as much space, because one of the nice things about I statements in an author's work is that you get to evaluate and say, well, is that true for me too? But the we now look at the world, we experience the world now as this, is kind of the path is laid out for everyone to see things the way that Michael does.
These significant moments in which I was introduced to present moment awareness.
He makes another big distinction between awareness and present awareness, but his big distinction is present moment awareness. But if you're in present awareness, you're outside of time, so the word moment doesn't necessarily make sense. But it does to Michael, right? And so here's, this whole terrain is I think, it's important to think a little bit about it because, we have to learn as an audience to differentiate between one person experiencing a certain thing and feeling some well-being by changing the language or, doing or not doing a certain thing, and, how many people experience the same thing. Now, this is a good book to look at because I'm very positive about the felt experience that I've had breathing. So I started breathing differently because of this book. And I've seen maybe a 50% improvement in my personal well-being, which of course has a very specific context. But to me, that makes this, a wonderful book. But all these little kind of divisive mental nuances that are overlaid on, the beautiful approach to breath, is a little bit of a tangled path that I have to sort out for myself.
Came a yardstick by which I measured subsequent explorations into what became for me the art of integration. When anything I explored led to an increase in present moment awareness, I embraced it as authentic. When it didn't, I wasted no more time on it.
So that's what Michael has made of it. Does something, increase his presence or not? And it's probably a pretty good map for a variety of things. However, again, in the grandiosity of things, for example, if you've got a court summons and it doesn't bring present awareness to read the court summons, do you waste no more time on it? If you've got a tax bill and it doesn't improve your present awareness, do you waste no more time on it and put it away? This is an architecture which all architectures are built on ignoring lots of edge cases and lots of data, and that's the nature of these architectures. And so I think it's useful to highlight how flimsy all architectures are, including, this exchange right here. It's flimsy. Like, you could easily pick this apart. Like, what's this guy doing, talking about little nitpicky, irritations on a mental level on a book about presence? And you say, well, yeah, what is he doing, right? And it falls apart, right? So this falls apart that easily, right? Like, that's not a very good way to, why isn't he breathing? Why isn't he talking, breathing rather than doing this presence? It's a good question, right? It just falls apart. And that's, I think somewhat liberating, but also alarming, because, why do people read the Bible who are deciding, that someone decides they want to explore their spirituality, their relationship with all that is, with the transcendent? Why might someone pick the Bible? Why might someone go to the Catholic Church rather than the New Presbyterian or whatever it is, right? Well, a big reason is tradition, meaning that's what I grew up with. So that's more familiar. It's more family. Familiar, family, that's why. And so to the degree that we want something solid, so one of the balance points for people going into something new, many people have never breathed in a certain way and experienced transcendent consciousness, so that's new. So the fear of the unknown, the awkwardness and like, what's going to happen? What if this happens? What if that happens? Is then counterbalanced with something family, something old, something traditional. And so one of the ways that new writers, because we're in an explosive period of new ideas, where this is basically this entire process, the presence process, right? It's very official, the presence process. And it's read very officially throughout the book by the narrator. But this is one guy for a speck of a speck of a speck in human history, having some very specific experiences that he has to decide what to do with. And he decides to organize and structure it and share it with some other people. He gets some good results, some bad results. He refines the process. He gets better results. And then he decides to put it in a book, and he has to call it something. So he calls it the presence process, and then refers to it from that point on. But it's that ephemeral at one level, one guy, one moment of time, responding to some very specific things at some very specific moments, and receiving good results. And then other people coming into contact with that guy, and including me, and having beneficial results, right? But, right after this, he talks about, how you should listen to the book in a very correct way. It is the procedural phenomena, the this, the that, there's all this language there. But basically, read it the way I want you to read it, do it the way I want you to do it, adopt all my language, and you will get the best results, because it's specifically designed layer by layer and all this stuff. But I've already broken that. Meaning, as soon as I first began hearing his story, I began breathing. And I noticed beneficial results. So I continued to breathe in that same technique and noticed beneficial results. And the breathing and the beneficial results were 10 times more effective than almost anything that he said in the book. I've now finished the book and I'm listening to it, a second time. But I'm now, if I was to analyze, the entire book, I got a sense of healing and well-being from about 5% of what he said. About 20%, like it's caring. It's a lot of love for someone to have a great experience, figure some stuff out, and take the time and care to organize it and share it with other people. And this guy's done that. I mean, bravo. You know, what a wonderful step forward, right? This guy has experienced all kinds of, amazing insights and stuff and is sharing them with other people. Phenomenal. So about 20% of the positive impact is just that kind of paradigm. Someone's figured out how to solve some of their own pains and problems and is, giving service to other people. And it might even be 30% of the impact of the book for me. So we've got 5% of the actual words are medicinal as I experience them, right? They counteract some toxin from the extreme opposite that I've experienced in my life. So a medicinal set of words, 5%. And then 30%, this intent, this care, and also just celebrating a human spirit. This guy had a potentially deadly illness and was in severe pain and figured out how to do something about that when none of the other modalities work. But that's another part of the cult dynamic, right? None of the other modalities work. That's the beginning of a hero's journey, right? Because you don't have to leave the circle of the known if the known works. A hero's journey is when you step outside the bound of safety. So he went to top neurological doctors. He went to this, he did that, he did this, he did that, and none of it worked. And then he stepped outside the circle. He went on his own hero's journey, and that worked for him, right? But it's important to understand that every modality that's out there is the same exact story, right? This person went to this energy work, but the word was wrong. It should have been this word, and then it was instead that. It was prana rather than yana, and so then that didn't work. And then they did this, and then they did this. Then they did this and this, and then they invented Reiki, right? But, this guy went to Reiki, and Reiki didn't work. But the guy who invented Reiki did all these other things, and that didn't work, and then Reiki solved the problem. So now Reiki is the new thing. And then this person invented saunas, and this person invented this. And the hero's journey completes, if it completes at all, when the person that sets out in the unknown to find something that they didn't find in the known works for them. And then they come back and they share it to the community, and you have the completion, a successful completion of the hero's journey, right? So if the presence process really worked for everyone going forward in time, there would be no more hero's journey, right? The presence process would expand and expand and expand. And at some point, if it was the best technique that was ever and could ever be invented, at some point everyone would find relief to all kinds of chronic pain and illnesses using the presence process. And they wouldn't have to leave the circle to go on a hero's journey. But that's not what's happening right now, right? Right now, there are people who have done the presence process, and it didn't work. And now they've invented new terms, right? Now we're not integrating, they're now syntegrating. They're now doing this. They're inventing new terms. They're creating a structure around it. And they found relief in, breathing in one nose and smoking in a psychedelic snuff in the other nose, and did this, and then they chanted and did this. And that was the breakthrough that, and they'd never done that before, and they'd never heard of it. And now their life is completely different, right? And then they come back, and now it's the new thing and the new thing, right? So the reality is that life likes experimentation. Life likes iteration. Life likes variety. Life likes optionality. I mean, life started the size of a pea, and now look at it. Now look at it. trillions and trillions of trees, creating trillions and trillions of leaves of every shape imaginable. I mean, life has been busy creating variety everywhere. And so, but we do have a certain need for certainty. We have a need for variety and certainty both. And we kind of balance them. And so, one of the responses to that need is to dogmatize these, somewhat ephemeral, unique experiences of an individual, and turn it, rather than, I did this and this happened, to the present process, and we experience that this happens, and we experience that happens. Like, there's a lot of grandiosity in projecting that we out there. So let's see if any more of that comes up. There was one whole chapter that was just filled with, a lot of grandiosity, and this is the way it is. But let's see if we can find it.
To this day, the experience of present moment awareness remains my trusted barometer, assisting me in brushing aside inefficient activities and glamorized but impotent modalities that are nothing more than window dressing.
So all the other modalities that he didn't discover are window dressing. But that's exactly...
The presence process, track 2. The pathway of awareness and 7-year cycle. The pathway of awareness. Acknowledging and operating in line with a pathway of awareness that's native to all humans is why the presence process is perceptually impactful.
So that could be complete nonsense, right? Because the process, according to the author, is perceptually impactful. Doesn't every perception have an impact? I mean, what's different about this? There's a lot of words here for, leading up to breathing well.
Oftentimes obvious and, considering all that is accomplished, borders on effortless. Within this text, we call this the pathway of awareness. Our experience...
So all the pathways of awareness become the pathway of awareness, and that's just more of the illusion of order, the illusion of certainty, because as far as I can tell, there's 1,000 ways to take the ideas in this book and antithesize them, sympathize with them, synergize, do new things. And at least half of those 1,000 things, different ways, could have beneficial impact for some people.
Once we recognize our footprints on the pathway of awareness and identify the 7-year cycle in our life experience, we are better equipped to integrate the causal points of uncomfortable experiences.
So, obviously, he's big on the 7-year cycle, but it's, just to play devil's advocate, we could play the 6 3/4 year cycle. The cycle of the sun doesn't have to be broken symmetrically into 12 units. We could have 13 months, 20 months, and as long as they're symmetrical, the system works. We've just broken things down into 12, equally. And, I don't know if the 7-year or the 6-year or the 8-year is always the case. What if someone is emotionally regressed with trauma and they have the emotional life of a 2-year-old? Is it still 7? And so a lot of this is just, put out there a little bit too grandiosely to, at least for me, to understand, enough to even have an opinion. And so for it to be put forth as we see this and we see that is a bit much for me.
The pathway of awareness is easy to identify.
So the pathway to awareness is easy to identify, but he has to take an entire book to identify it. And he doesn't ask, is it easy for you to identify the pathway of awareness? And my bet is if you take 1,000 people and ask them all to identify the pathway of awareness, that they're all going to say different things, or there will at the very least be 20 different factions. And if it's so easy, why would you have 20 factions? Well, obviously, because they didn't hear it from the one person at one moment in time who has the correct path that is easily identifiable if you copy his book.
Just observe the natural development of a newborn. Even though the emotional, mental, and physical capacities are already evident and developing.
And these things also hide biases. Just observe the natural development of a 2-year-old. So what if you have a 2-year-old who's being sexually molested? This happens. Is that then unnatural? What's the difference between the natural and the unnatural? Because life creates certain people with incestuous tendencies and certain people who are incest survivors. And so is it natural or is it not natural? I mean, these things are the complexity of reality. But one of the things that a very dogmatic book, whether it's the Bible or the Quran, or this is the way of the Lord, or whatever it is, appeal to people is precisely, meaning I think this book would appeal to someone a lot who doesn't just want to follow their intuition and see, and let their own energy naturally come out, but that want someone to tell them what to do. Now, I think that we do need people to tell us what to do sometimes to achieve more well-being. And what I mean by that is I'd heard about breath work, but it wasn't until a therapist recommended this book and I read it and practiced it, that I actually realized, wow, this works better than anything that I know, the breathing, that is. So let's see what else we find. And this, I just want to go into this enough. The entire book is filled with this, but I just want to go into this enough that I'm aware, and if you want, you're aware of just how arbitrary so much of this can be. And it's easy to accept, I think, because, most people who pursue self-help are in pain. Meaning that people who say, I'm completely delighted with the world as it is, I love myself, I love my family, and let's just do more of this. Rarely say, you know what, I need to go find a way to change. No, that's not the way it is. So by definition, anyone who walks into a self-help section of a book to help themselves is dissatisfied and or in pain. And they don't want the pain to happen again. And so they want to figure out how to reduce the pain in the future and have more of what they want. That's why every single person, that's why I picked up this book, right? I didn't write to a therapist saying, I could be out on the beach. I could be having sex. I could be traveling and enjoying life. I've got everything working perfectly for me. But rather than being out on the beach, I think I'd like to pay you $175 an hour to talk about painful parts of my life rather than do all that. But I think that I can't think of anything more enjoyable. I could be making barbecue. I could do this. I could do that. I could be watching a movie. But, something about paying $175 an hour to a therapist that it can't be beat. It's like the most enjoyable thing I could do with my life is be here with you, right? So there's pain and there's fear of pain that drives in me to talk to this therapist. And then there's the therapist is recommending this book. And then there's hope, right? That pain and fear will go down. Now that's why I'm recommending the book, is pain and the fear of pain did go down reading this book by about 50% over the last few days of doing the breathing work, right? So incredible. Like, it's free. Breath is good for the brain. Hooray, right? Bravo. Brilliant. But it doesn't mean we have to accept all the packaging. Now, and part of where I'm going with the antithesis of this packaging, meaning a really good idea, thank you, a really good idea to breathe in this way. But the story begins that the author was in an amazing amount of pain. And this set of thoughts and this set of ideas and this set of practices has permanently changed this thing. And if you get towards the end of the book, it's incredibly grandiose, right? Everything we want comes in effortlessly. Like, do you know anyone who's ever had that? Anyone at all in the history of humanity? I mean, did everything Jesus wanted come in effortlessly? Buddha, was it effortless? Sitting there, meditating, fighting with your father, is that effortless? And did he get all that he wants? I mean, does Buddha enjoy the amount of suffering here today, or did Buddha not get what he wanted effortlessly? And Jesus, was that, his effortless plan to be nailed to a cross? And why did you forsake me? I mean, that's effortless. I mean, just you teach your students, and they all do it exactly wrong. Don't kill people. Well, I'm going to go kill people who aren't Christian. A lot of effort. But according to Michael, we come to the realization, we open up to where everything happens effortlessly, right? All that we want, effortlessly. I mean, this guy has healed a chronic, potentially terminal, painful illness. He's written a book. He's got, he's healed this person. He's healed this person. And now he's living, supposedly, if it's a we, hopefully that includes him if he's writing the word. He's now living in an effortless reality where everything he wants comes in effortlessly. Maybe we have a different definition of effort, right? But stuff like that is potentially poisonous. And what I mean by that is, it's natural to copy success, right? I'm in pain. This guy figured out how to not be in pain. I want to copy him. Of course we do. That's incredibly natural, right? It's intelligent. But it's very easy for an author writing grandiosely, how, we discover this and we discover that and this and that. And it's very easy to paint a picture that has absolutely nothing to do with their daily experience. or has 20% to do with their daily experience. Meaning 20% of the time, while they're meditating and want to meditate, their meditation is effortless. And they want to meditate, so everything they want is effortless. But they get up, they get dressed without any effort, no energy expended. What is effort, right? They get in their car and it just moves forward without pressing the accelerator. Or they make the same effort as everyone else, only now it's called not with any effort as opposed to effortless. What is this, right? We discover this, we discover that, the this. And the poison is you actually have to pay your taxes, right? They didn't pay themselves effortlessly. And you think, well, maybe I did the presence process wrong. And you actually have to put your foot down and heave yourself up off the ground and stand up and walk there rather than it effortlessly happening. And maybe I'm doing it wrong, right? And so, my intention in, creating this recording is to train myself and to invite anyone who's willing to, because it's a difficult balance. You're trying to learn from someone who knows something more than you do. And in this case, Michael knows something more than I do, right? And to that extent, you don't want to be critical and filtered and block it and stuff, because if you know more than they do, then why are you reading the book, right? But just because they know that breathing is really important and they know that more than you do doesn't mean that their version of language is better than anyone else's. It doesn't mean that because they had a failed healing practice that all healers are bunk. It doesn't mean that because this exact version of the process worked for this person and this person that it is the best process for you. It doesn't mean any of that, right? It's a probability field, right? And so, at any rate, I'll close here. But it's, and there's one other thing that I think is important. I could go, I could go through this entire book and pick apart and criticize 95% of what's said, by saying that there's an equally valid point over here and here, or that this point doesn't make sense with this other point, meaning I notice numerous instances where the author, at one point says go that way, and at the other point says go that way, and doesn't seem to notice that they've pointed you in two opposite directions, a few pages apart. Like we always trust our nature, says the author, seemingly somewhat pompously, right? But we are not pompous. We are not pompous, right? And we have to understand this. In other words, we trust life, we trust nature. We're part of life and part of nature, right? But you're wrong, right? You have to trust my book, because my book is closer to nature than your nature, right? I mean, there's all kinds of paradoxes and confusion and and nonsense. And so, I could spend, at least 5 hours going through the shaky connections of thought. Not to mention that a tremendous amount of the teaching is to get rid of thought. And all thought is based on language. And you can't talk for 7 hours or longer about the importance of getting rid of language. You should shut up, right? Just begin the chapter 1, right, and say, breathe, and don't listen to the rest of this Audible book, right? Because every single word forms a thought in relationship with other words. You've got, more than 7 hours of words there, generally saying, this is wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, and that's wrong. The other approaches are wrong. But that's also, unnecessary in many cases. Every other technique doesn't have to be window dressing just because one man has found one pathway to presence that works for him. So that being said, if 95% of it could easily be pulled apart for me, should I look down on the book or not be interested in the book? And I would say no. There are a lot of things that are 95% suboptimal, probably everything. And yet, if that 5% can improve my well-being by 50%, then ignoring the 95% that doesn't work for me to get to that 5% becomes the single most intelligent thing that I can do with my day. And so that's what I'm doing, weeding my way through the 95% that, seems like nonsense, seems contradictory, seems absurd, seems, hypocritical, seems grandiose, seems this, seems that, to get to, one, the intention that I think is solid. Like this person has gone on a hero's journey and healed themselves. No. They've integrated themselves. But, for the rest of us, has healed their pain, not integrated their pain, healed their pain. And has, stories to tell and a recipe to offer that could be helpful to you. And if your life did improve as well as my life, 50%, well, then it's a tremendous act of self-love to take it seriously, in this case, the breathing exercise seriously. But you don't have to take any of the words that package the breathing exercise that seriously. You can take the experience seriously and see, does it work, right? Anyway, thank you.